On the ferry to Ellis Island. This was a test. It's just the IQ for incoming in records. Registry room where most people would be waiting. Original bench. This is where the inspectors would sit. Doctors would mark incoming people with chalk marks if they saw or suspected any poor health or anything like that. So here's a list of letters and what illness they corresponded to. Here was the process to getting through Ellis Island. Most people got through just fine, but there were, as you see, a couple ways to get delayed through admission. They would also check for this thing that made people blind and was contagious, and they used this instrument, and then they would poke up their eyeball! They would poke their eyeball up their eyelid! This is someone who was at Ellis Island who said that they were afraid that they wouldn't hear their name be called and would be stuck waiting there forever. And I was like, that's something Colin would probably worry about. These are cards everyone had that said on what page their name in the manifest would be, this paper right here. So investigators would know when they were asking names who on their registry it was. And this is a section talking about interpreters that were used at Ellis Island, and below it there's another plaque that talks about how interpreters would sometimes bend the rules to help out the people coming in. And there's this one story that's about this woman who was from Germany who was illiterate. And very often if you were illiterate, they would turn you back from Ellis Island. So they would very often give you a newspaper in your own language and ask you to read a sentence. So this woman had an interpreter, and the interpreter said, do you know how to read? And she goes, no. And so he goes, okay, recite like a Bible verse. He gives her like a Bible verse, I don't know. He says, recite this. So she looks at the newspaper and like pretends to read it in German. And then after that, he goes, yeah, look, she can read, and sends her through. And apparently there were quite a few interpreters who would do things like that. And there was a lot of trickery going on. And it's funny because, they have interviews. They'll show interviews with people who were at Ellis Island as kids or were like 20s, like still pretty young. And they would talk about how a common trick was another prerequisite for Ellis Island is that you had to have $25 on you. So they would ask, do you have $25 on you? And you would show it to them maybe. And there's this one story about these three guys who went together, and they had $25 between them. So they didn't have it each. They had $25. So what they would do is they would go up to the inspector, and they would, and the first guy would like show the money, and then he'd like put it behind his back and pass it to the guy next to him, and the guy next to him would show it, and then he'd pass it to the third guy, and the third guy would show it. So they all had $25 and they made it through. And that was actually something that was pretty common, actually, where like even getting off the ferry, like people would help them. So people who were in Ellis Island or who did work with with people who coming into Ellis Island would give them $25, but then would tell them, oh, but like pass it back or give it back after you're done with it. So it was just money to flash around before they would pass it to someone else. So it's pretty funny because you have testimonies from people saying, yeah, I didn't have $25 to my name, but like I had $25 in my hand. This is where you would have your hearing if inspectors had thought you were lying or a criminal. You only needed 2 out of 3 people to approve you to go on. And here's the food court. You'll notice a lot of the foods are in different languages. Part of the museum exhibit is they have these phones that you can pick up, and then they play interviews from people who were at Ellis Island, usually as kids. And there are so many recordings of just people going, and I had never had a banana before, had my first banana at Ellis Island. Oh, and a ham sandwich. Oh, that was good. I never had a ham sandwich before. Oh yeah, when I remember having I don't know, what other things, oatmeal or something, I don't know. So most people went by train after Ellis Island. You should pause and read this because it's kind of funny. This is pretty interesting because a lot of people leaving Ellis Island did not actually know how to speak English. They would just put their train ticket on their clothes, and the conductors would like lead them to where their destination said, or what train was on their coat. If inspectors deemed your mental stability was in question, which was kind of everyone, they were like, "Oh, shifty eyes, is a bit frightened." They would send you to the mental ward, and you would just do these very basic tests, like some very basic tasks. Sometimes some of them were more difficult, but some of them were pretty easy. Most of them were pretty easy. And if you passed that, then you could be on your way. This is a map of the hospital that they would send people to if they were sick. And I think it's kind of funny because it's like psychiatric ward, and then it's like measles ward, measles ward, measles ward, measles ward. Everything's a measles ward. There's like one isolation ward, and there's more measles wards. Another interesting tidbit, there were picture brides, which were brides who married men, just kind of looking for someone to move to America with him so we could have someone there who shared the same customs and things like that. These are the stairs of separation. You'll notice there are 3 stairs. On the left is people who are leaving, who are going to go just live in New York. On the far right is people who are leaving, but we're going to probably take a train to somewhere else. And the center was people who were going to detention centers or hospitals and who were not going to be leaving Ellis Island until later, or were going to be deported later. This is one of the hospitals where people would have stayed for a bit. They were sick. They had some of the original passports that some people brought with them to Ellis Island. So I just took some pictures of the names and then some pictures of like the Japanese, some of the older Japanese passports. This is a Russian passport. It's got the children on it too. It was a passport for the children and the parents, same paper. Another Japanese one. This one's a child's passport. Most of the Russians that immigrated during this time were apparently tailors or merchants. We're on this balcony, and apparently it was used just for like native New Yorkers to come and watch the proceedings, like just watch people be in line, which is weird. It's a weird hobby to have. This is a model of what Ellis Island used to look like. It was actually at this time called something equivalent to like Gallows Island, because they would hang pirates there. And then it grew and grew and grew. So actually most of Ellis Island is not natural land, but it's the land that was taken out when the subways were built. So when subways were built, they dug all that land up, and a lot of it was just kind of added to Ellis Island. For the boat. And we stopped for sushi afterwards. I was really hungry, and they gave us free matcha ice cream afterwards.